he likely felt nothing at all. No pain, no suffering. Unless, of course, he was still conscious when he went over the edge. I try not to dwell on that. I knew immediately that I had been too aggressive with my assault. My goal was to stun him and render him incapable of defending himself. Instead, my strike nearly killed him. He reflexively reached for the back of his head and fell to his knees. I waited and watched, unsure how things would progress. He seemed to recognize the blood as it poured onto the granite, and gained enough wherewithal to stagger back to his feet. Before he could turn around, my shoe met the back of his pants and he was gone. I didn't hear him land, never heard a splash. I dared not venture to the edge of the bluff for fear that someone had spotted his body tumbling toward the ocean, like a skydiver whose chute had failed, and would subsequently look to the source of the fall and see me peering over the ledge. I assessed the bluff now, and worked to figure out the best way to fix my blunder. The blood would tell a different story than I had hoped to draw tonight. It took only a fraction of a second to make my decision. The carnage on the bluff was impossible to hide. The splatter across my face, however, needed to be addressed. On closer inspection, the spray of blood streaked down my chest and onto my left hand. Another collection of red, I noticed, had speckled my weapon. It was an unfortunate error, unforced and brought on entirely by my eagerness. There was no way to solve all of these problems. I chose the most pressing, the blood that was covering me, and settled on a solution. I turned from the setting sun and the blood-covered bluff and ran down the Piton, stomping over dirt and through brush, and down the man-made staircase of boulders and bamboo on a beeline to the cottage. Gros Piton, The Bluff, March 29th, 2007. Julian Christ made the hike up Gros Piton in St. Lucia's southwestern point in just under 30 minutes. Summiting the Piton was a popular tourist excursion, and he and his group had made the trek the day before. This evening, though, Julian ascended only to the Soufriere Bluff, a spot he had found yesterday and determined to be a perfect place to watch the sunset. A simple hike, it required little more than following the trail that spun its way around the base of the mountain. The most strenuous part of the journey was a steep climb up a series of 50 steps built into the side of the cliff by native St. Lucians who used boulders and bamboo to create a navigable staircase across the steep lower gorge. Once a hiker was past the only spirited challenge on the way up to Soufriere Bluff, the rest of the climb was a tranquil waltz along a dirt path that offered occasional glimpses of the Caribbean Sea and the Jalousie Plantation. It was a picturesque hike, but when he made it to the clearing, Julian knew he'd picked a flawless location for what he had planned. He pulled his backpack off his shoulders and laid the blanket across the smooth granite of the bluff. Below him was a pristine view of the Piton's Bay, where, in about 40 minutes, the sun would descend from the cloudless blue sky and sink into the horizon. He checked his watch. To make up for his foolishness, the setting needed to be perfect before she arrived. He had nearly ruined everything earlier today. He'd been wrong to accuse her, especially when it was he who was hiding things. But he'd make it up to her tonight. He pulled 2 champagne flutes from his bag and popped the top on a bottle of Veuve Clicquot yellow label, the cork rocketing into the air in a high arc until it fell out of sight over the edge of the bluff. His stomach dropped as he watched the cork's flight. For the 20th time since starting up Gros Piton, Julian checked his pocket, rubbing his fingers over the edges to make sure he hadn't lost it. With everything prepared, Julian stood to the side of the blanket as he looked out at the falling sun. A sailboat, with its colorful sail full of wind, angled across Piton's Bay. Down to his right, he could see Sugar Beach and the small group gathering to watch the sunset. If there were a more beautiful place...